Hello and welcome to this new ER2 modding SDK tutorial. Today we're going to learn how to create custom static vehicles. Let's start by setting up this static vehicle gun. To do so, right click on our model imported in our project folder and choose ER2 mods, vehicle, static. Now that our model is spawned on the scene, we can notice how many scripts are automatically applied to it. We can start by checking the LOD group. In this case, we don't have, for this example, low poly version of this model. We only have the high poly, so we are going to assign only the LOD 0. We're going to delete the other LOD groups. And as always, we're going to set the cool distance to 2. Moving on, we got the vehicle script where we can assign the icon. We can check the seat positions. So let's notice how there are already 2 seats, seats 1 and seats 2, which is these yellow bubbles here. We can move them whenever we want. We can change some properties here. So here, for example, we got the seat 0, which is not set as driver, but the seat 2 it is. Because in a template like this, you want the seat 2 being able to rotate the gun and the seat 1 being able to fire it. Notice that this is currently just a static vehicle and doesn't have any turret assigned. So for the moment, the only thing this can do is rotating if you are in the seat 2. Sometimes you don't want your vehicle being able to be rotated, so you can just remove its driver from every seat. And you can also add or remove more seats by these 2 plus and minus button. Remember, when you add a new seat, to also add a new seat position. So I'm gonna Ctrl C, Ctrl V this to copy it. So now we got 3 seats in total. And now I can assign this new seat here, seat 2, 1. But we don't need another extra seat here, so we can remove this, and we can also remove the seat position from the hierarchy. Also notice how each of these seats has a seat position with a component. You can click this button to make the seat position hidden. This is useful if your soldier is gonna be inside a closed tank and you don't want your soldier to be rendered at all. But for open top vehicles like this one, you want this to be enabled. Here you can set the animation you want to be on the seat. So this is not a good animation for a vehicle like this. You got your table of animations in the documentation. And in the table we can see what animation can fit here. For this kind of vehicle, I suggest to use this one for the first seat and this one for the second seat. Let's move on with the vehicle script. So here, notice how we set the second seat as driver, but not the first seat. This means that to rotate and move this vehicle, in this case the static vehicle can only be rotated. So to drive it, someone needs to be in the second driver position. But notice how you can make that to rotate the vehicle, player needs to be exactly in this seat if you disable that, or player can be in any seat if you enable this. Notice though that even if this is enabled and the player is, for example, in the first seat, you will still need a unit to be in this seat to be able to rotate the vehicle. Moving on, you can set the third person camera distance and the speed of rotation of the vehicle when some driver is rotating it. You can make this vehicle non-rotatable if you remove any driver from any seat. So for the sake of this test, I will actually leave its driver enabled in the second position. So what I expect to happen is that the entire vehicle can be rotated by the second position, but I will make so that the turret itself can only rotate up and down. You can set the box collision for your vehicle. In this case, this is already fine. You want the collision to happen mostly on the front here and not really on the legs, not to block the AI or the player. And now we can move on setting up the actual gun. This is a procedure that is the same for any kind of vehicle. It might be static, it might be a wheeled vehicle, it might be a plane, it might be a bomber, it might be a tank. It doesn't matter. When you want to set up something that can shoot from a vehicle, you're gonna set up a turret. To do so, select the mesh of the object you want to turn into a turret. For example, this entire object in this case, but it might be just the turret mesh of your tank. For example, if you're setting that into an armored vehicle or a tank, right click and choose ER2 mods, vehicle, turret, and here you can create a gun turret, a machine gun turret, a turret that has both gun and machine gun, or a commander turret. Apart from the commander turret, which is a completely different thing, you can edit these three things as much as you can. These are just three different templates of the same thing. But in this case, we're setting gun again, so just choose gun. As you can see, your mesh has been moved. Let's see how this works now. So basically, you have your y-axis, which is the axis of rotation in the, let's say, left right for your gun, and you have x-axis inside it, which is the up-down rotation of your gun. Differently from the rotation of the entire vehicle, which literally means rotate the vehicle around, the y-axis is the rotation of the turret of the vehicle. The difference is that a vehicle can have multiple turrets and they can rotate independently from the vehicle. In this case, this is not really a turret and this cannot really rotate left-right. So the first thing we want to do here is to make sure that the y-axis bond is set to 0. Y-axis bond means how much this turret can rotate left and right in degrees. If you set it to 180, it means that the turret can rotate 180 degrees to the left and to the right. And of course, it can do full 360 at this point. But if you limit this, that will mean that the turret will be able to rotate right for this amount of degree and stop at some point, or left with the same amount of degree and stop at some point. We're gonna set this to 0 because this is not a turret that can rotate, but we can rotate the entire vehicle. Next, we want to assign correctly the x-axis rotation pivot. So let's select it and let's move it to the position where we want our gun to rotate the barrel up and down. So the position is approximately something like here. As you can see, this is the pivot bolt of the gun. So the position can be something like here. And now we can rotate this up and down, but we want our mesh to follow this rotation. So what we can do is to take the barrel and the gun meshes in this example and drag and drop them inside the x-axis. So now if we rotate the x-axis up and down, the meshes that are inside it will follow it. Notice how inside the x-axis we also have a look position that we can set whenever we want, and this is the position where our aiming will happen. So I want my aiming to be something like here because we got the scope here. Then we got the fire position, which is the position where the bullet and the fire effects are generated from. So let's put it here. Next, let's go back to turret gun So notice how we have a box collider here, which is the collider of the turret. It makes sense because if you think about that, normally you have a tank with a collision in the hull, which in our case is the collision on the top root object here, and the turret that has its own collision as the turret can rotate independently. But in this case, this is a static vehicle, so the turret and the hull are not completely separate things. So in this case, we can even remove the box collision from the turret. Going on, we already set the y-axis bond to 0, and we can set now the axis bond for the x. So we want the x-axis to go up, in this case a lot, something like 25 degrees. That means that our turret can rotate this up, reaching 25 degrees, and can rotate down to 10 degrees, as this is already set to be 10 degrees. We can maybe decrease this a little bit, something like 5 sounds better. Going on, we can set other properties. For example, we can set the field of view when aiming down sight. 25 is a good zoom for this case. We got the parameter for the scope position we were setting previously. We got the sprite ID of the scope we want to display when aiming down sight. This is something else that we can find in our string table document. We got the rotation speed of the turret. We can set if this is an anti-aircraft turret, so it will mostly aim at aircraft in that case. We got a weapon already set up by our template. Here we got the template for a gun. So we got the bullet types. In this case, we got an anti-tank bullet and a smoke bullet. This is something you can still find in our document. You got all the bullets present in the game. You can set how many ammos does this kind of bullets has when the vehicle spawns. You got the fire position we set up previously. We got some sounds for firing. We also got the variant for firing at distance. We got some other sounds for looping. This is mostly when setting up flamethrowers. We can set this not to have recoil. Normally that's for machine guns. You can set how many rounds per minute this fires. As this uses this kind of ammo, this doesn't change much, because a round per minute is mostly when you are using magazines here in the ammo. In fact, here, while in this table we assigned ammos from individual gun bullets, which can load just one per time, we could even set some magazines che non ci sono qui, vabbè, ripeto. Depending on what we are assigning, if we are assigning an individual bullet or a magazine, here we might have multiple bullets in the weapon. In that case, round per minute makes sense, in case you have a magazine or an ammo belt. You can set if you want to reload when firing. This is for mortars, because mortars reload when firing and doesn't reload before firing. Rimuovimi questo M. We got the time needed for the reload, the randomized dispersion angle of the bullet, and how many tracers you want to display after each bullet. If you set this to 0, every bullet will have a tracer. If you set it, for example, to 3, there will be a tracer every 3 bullets. This is mostly for machine guns, so let's set this to 0. One last thing, to make the game recognize that this is a static artillery and not a static MG, that will basically depend from the rate of fire of the main gun. So let's choose our turret. Let's go in the weapons. Let's select our main weapon, which in this case is the only weapon we have here. And let's set this to something like 10. This will not change much anyway, because this gun can load 1 bullet per time. because again we set it up an ammo type which is an individual bullet and not a magazine, so the shooting speed will mostly depend on the reload time. One last thing, of course you can set more weapon types, for example if you want a coaxial MG, and that is something that it's automatically generated when you select gun and MG template, but for the sake of this test we're just gonna show this. We'll showcase that template in the tank creation tutorial. Okay, this is all for setting up this turret. And basically it's all for setting up a turret for a custom vehicle. Again, what we set it up today is a turret for a static gun, but this turret component can be very flexible and can be a turret for any kind of vehicle. It can be a turret that rotates fully 360. It can be a turret that fires straight forward, like the machine guns of a plane, or it can be a static gun or a static machine gun. It can be really whenever you want. It just depends on how you set it up. So now let's save our prefab, and so let's choose a folder and let's drag and drop our vehicle there. Let's assign this to a bundle, for example test vehicle bundle, and let's compile our mod. Let's choose our mod, let's give it a name. We can set a mod description, we can see what's inside. So this is the test vehicle we just created. We can set the visibility and we can start the upload. So let's subscribe to the mod we just created. Let's wait for it to be downloaded. And let's go test it. So we are now ready to test our created mod. We could do that from the mission editor, from a custom mission, but for this test we will just go to the shooting range. So as we set our static gun to be a low round per minute weapon, it's gonna appear as artillery in this menu. We can enter it, we can aim up and down, we can shoot. We cannot aim left and right because we set the Y rotation bounds to be 0, because if you remember, I wanted to be able to rotate this gun only from the driving position, which in this case is the second position. So if now I go in the second position, I can rotate the gun left and right. So congratulations for creating your first static vehicle. In the next tutorial we're gonna check how to create a wheeled vehicle, and later on how to create an entire tank with turrets that will have not only guns like this, but also coaxial and hull machine guns.